trying to read some of these questions, and we've got several questions. If you haven't got your questions written down on the cards, go ahead and keep writing them if something has come up, and we'll kind of hold them up, and we'll continue collecting them. Just on. Yeah. All right. Did anybody introduce you guys while I was trying to read questions? So you've all been introduced. All right. Good. Well, the good news is maybe some of these questions will get answered, because the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask each of the panelists to start off with a short presentation that kind of introduces their system and gives you some background. And that's probably when the real questions you'll come up with to write down. So I don't want to hold up any longer. Let's ask. Did you guys flip a coin to see who was up first, or did we just go right down the list here? Rodney's closest to me, so I don't know. I guess we start with Rodney. Rodney, come on up. You get your thing loaded.
This mic, you can use the cordless one, whichever one works for you.
I'm not that tall. Clicker too. All right, I'll get the bugs out for you guys. All right, I got it lowered down. Can you hear me now? Maybe.
A little closer. A little closer.
I can't stay in one place anyway. I'll get nervous. Can you hear me now? There we go. Okay. Well, thanks for having me here. Thanks to everybody that stayed around. It's been a really good day, I think. A lot of things to learn, and I feel like your brain's getting tired by now, but I'll try and stay under my 18 minutes before all your blood goes from here to there. So we'll do that, and I'm just real briefly. Some of you, I know, have been to some of the other meetings I've spoken at and stuff. Probably seen some of these slides. I got about 15 slides we're going to go through in 14 minutes. So hopefully they'll just spur some questions. We're not going to get real deep into the details on each one, but we'll just zip through here, give a little bit of background on what we're doing and how we address soil quality on our farm. So. Again, we're just south of town here, down by Arcadia. 100% no-till since '89. We kind of really did the transition from '89 to '92, where we went to full no-till, corn and beans both. 90% corn beans, 10% corn after corn. 320 acres of hog manure a year. The rest is standard fertility. 1 acre grid program for that. Last points there are kind of just our theory, and we heard earlier today kind of where you come from and how that plays into how you address these things. So a couple points there. We really believe that conservation is the best economic model in the long term when you consider everything. And that's just what we live by. We don't believe with the tools you have today that there's any drag to no-till yields. There was certainly issues and struggles early on when we first did all this and learned a lot of things, but we think the tools are out there now to make that transition without having to be a yield drag and possibly the other way around. And we believe that we're accountable for what leaves our farm. I think being right here in Tipton and understanding the discussions that are going on with the drainage issues that we have here and Morse Reservoir and all those things, and the neighbors that we all have to the south, we're all going to have to, be responsible for what leaves our farm. So we try and address that. So again, continuous no-till, not rotational. Eliminate tillage events whenever we, in all cases except where we're trying to fix something, and allow soil structure and biology to build. Drainage is a foundation. We're in Tipton County. That's kind of the center of drainage for the whole state, I think. So, it's critical for us, and for no-till, it's even more critical. It just is necessary. We spend a lot of time on drainage. You can do a lot with cover crops. You can do a lot of things to improve water getting into the soil, improve your structure, but the soil types that we have here, you're going to have to address that drainage to be successful in no-till. We manage our soil pretty intensively with all sorts of amendments and different products, lime, gypsum, P&K, organics, all sorts of different things that we use, and we use prescriptions pretty, on everything. Every product we put on is put on with a prescription for whatever parameter that we think that we're putting it on for. And we just believe that once you get that soil in a balanced state, not necessarily a high test level state, but a balanced, productive state, then that's its most stable situation. Our nitrogen, we use anhydrous ammonia and hog manure. Both of those operations, we try and do minimal disturbance to go along with this system. So we use the John Deere single disc bar for the anhydrous. We also put thiazole with that, so tank there. And then on your right, our manure applicator bar, we use a drag line to keep the weight off the field. Those are Dietrich knives. We can inject that liquid manure with very little disturbance. Bottom right picture there is immediately following a 10,000 gallon of the acre manure application. So very little disturbance. Have to hit it sometimes with a harrow in the spring, depending on the year. If we do it in the fall, we don't do anything. We'll go right and plant back into it in the spring. So works really well. Cover crops, great tool, and we'll talk a little bit more about those at the end, but just a great way to boost the system, really build the soil. We've been hearing about that today. So what healthy soil returns to us after we try and do all these things and manage this? Obviously, it increases yield. We get more biology, big and small. Efficiency and cycling of our nutrients is critical, and we can operate at those with the nutrients that are available rather than doing the chemistry set approach. Drought tolerance, we certainly saw that last year. That soil temperature and evaporation is critical. Water infiltration and holding, all of those things, trafficability, economics, are just kind of all, for us in our system, if you embrace the whole system and try to make it work, we feel like it all works together. Certainly not going to go there today on all these numbers. I just wanted to point out the bottom line. We've done this spreadsheet a few times over the years with different input prices and all that. You can skew this so far one way or another. There's not much use to argue about it. But for us, and the way we kind of read the numbers, and some real close friends that we've got that are in conventional systems that will share numbers with us, it looks to us like about 20 bushel is the difference that you need to see. We would have to be 20 bushel less with no-till in order to be a break-even. So if we can get the same yield, we're 20 bushel ahead. If you're not willing to believe, looking at our crops a couple of weeks ago, they had some little bit of yellow in them and a little slower maybe than the conventional. So if you're not willing to believe they make the same, I'll argue that even if they make 20 bushel less, we're still right there in the ballgame. So that's about where we're at on the numbers there. So we're trying to use cover crops, which adheres to that. We're trying to remove compaction, help new farms transition from tillage into no-till, take advantage of that rotational advantage. We're growing corn and soybeans or continuous corn. We know there's benefits to rotations with other things. Economics around here, we want to stick to those cash crops, so we'll stick the cover crop in between, try and pick up some rotational advantage there. Soil quality and biology, we're just always trying to get those to the next level. Trap our nitrogen, our manure carryover from the previous year, soybean nitrogen, anything that we can do, have a living root there, grabbing a hold of that, building carbon and storing it that way rather than letting it leach out, I think is critical. Obviously erosion control may or may not be in specific fields an issue, but certainly we've got areas where pretty tremendous benefit. Breaking disease cycles, there's a whole lot of things you can do with cover crops for that. cycling nutrients, building organic matter. Anyway, just a lot of neat reasons to use cover crops that really fit into our system. And Grandpa did it, so he was pretty smart, and he had a lot of different crops in his toolbox compared to what we do these days, so kind of helps fit in there. So use annual ryegrass, still rye, wheat, oats, radish, clover, Austrian peas, and anything else we can get to go through the planter. So real quick, I always get a question about planting dates. For us, I usually have to say where I'm from, but right here, I'll say what I found that works is that on August 1st, you've got a whole lot of choices. You can do almost anything you want to do. Prior to August 1st, I don't recommend planting most things because they'll try to go to seed, which is not necessarily what you want. But after August 1st, you've got a whole lot of choices. You can do a lot of really neat things that'll grow nitrogen, all sorts of stuff. So that's following wheat. You get up from that window up to September 15th. Kind of phase out the Austrian peas and those kind of legumes after September 15th because we start to run out of growth time for those and to get them through the winter and to get what we want out of them. October 1st, I phase out, or the first week of October, I stop planting the radishes and oats and those kind of things where I'm depending on all my growth to be in the fall because there's just too many times if I plant any later than that, I just can't get enough growth in the fall to really feel like I'm getting the benefit out of those products and the money I'm spending on them. That doesn't mean I won't plant a cover crop, it just means I'm not going to choose those. Annual ryegrass, I think you can go up into late October with that and still get it established. We have survivability issues sometimes. It gets worse as you go later, but most of the annual ryegrass we would probably fly out anyway, but I think you can go late October with that. Cereal rye I put November 10th just because that usually catches, we're average into harvest for us about November 10th or 12th. That usually catches it. I think you could go to Thanksgiving if you wanted to with cereal rye around here and it would still grow and do just fine. So, provided you get germinated, that's the key. So, there is more information out there with cover crop selection tool and things like that. That's just what I've seen, down the road from here on what's worked for us. Planting methods have already kind of been covered. Certainly there's a lot of things to think about. Your seed size, your planting date. I generally, on that chart, that's based on good seed to soil contact. If I'm going to go aerial applied or surface applied, I roll that back by a week or two, depending on conditions. Just because you're a little slower getting going, not that there's anything negative there, but obviously if you put it in the ground and pack it in the dirt, it's going to take off a little bit faster than if it's on top. So I usually allow about a two-week window there, depending on whether I'm in the ground or on top. Anyway, so you got to look at your different moisture requirements, seed sizes, all those things, and pick all your different things, whether you're going to blow it on top or fly it on or use a drill. I encourage guys that are just wanting to try it to get find somebody with an old drill or get your old drill out. You can throw anything in a drill, any kind of mix you want it, just about anything if you want to try it. That's your best chance of success and your least headaches to go that way. And then from there you can go to either precision planting to save seed or blowing it on before the crop's off to get better growth. There's a lot of variables there at that point. So, I like the mixes like they've been talking about. At least we might not be going to 10-way mixes or anything like that yet, but I do like to see different root types, different growth rates, different functions, whether they're scavenging and storing or feeding biology, those kind of things, different things that different plant types and different root types do, basically. So you got to get a quality seed source. You're going to have to get it blended and delivered somehow to the field if you don't buy it already mixed. There's some issues with especially some of your hard seeds like radishes and veg and those kind of things coming about in the spring if they fail to germinate in the fall. Just need to be aware of that. It's not necessarily a problem, but something to be aware of. If you're doing a lot of aerial application, you're going to have neighbors that get stuff flown on them, and that's That's a fact. We had a great applicator this year. We still had, he did the best job we've ever had as far as that goes, but almost every field we got a neighbor that, on one end or the other, that got applied on. And so need to be aware of that and deal with that accordingly when you go talk to them or spray it for them or whatever you need to do. Seeding rates according to the way you're planting it. Chemical programs, both be cognizant of your residuals you've used on your previous crop and how you're going to kill it, and be aware, that if you're going to plant 1,000 acres of annual ryegrass, you need to have a plan on how you're going to get it killed and follow through with it. Tile lines I put on there, I keep hearing that the roots get in tile lines. I've seen roots in tile lines, never enough to plug one, but I have heard stories, so that's something that I think we should be looking at, obviously, but like I said, I keep hearing about it, I just haven't ever seen it. So, voles, with something like Cyril Rye that stays nice and green all winter long, those little critters like to find a home, and they are getting to be a problem. For us, we're still not really being super proactive because by now the beans are outgrowing them, and we've got some little holes out there, and you add up the acres, it doesn't add up to very much, but 2 weeks ago it was pretty doggone frustrating. so it's not all roses. There's those things you need to be aware of, just so you don't get flustered and think, boy, I shouldn't be doing this. The overall benefit will still outweigh those little oddities. So that's basically our whole farm in 15 months.
Thanks, Rodney. Next, we're going to have Hal come up here. Hal's from Clinton County.
Yes.
It's going to be really difficult following Rodney and then being ahead of Mike. I kind of knew this coming over here, and I've seen his and I've seen Mike's, so they're excellent speakers. I'll try to fill in a little void. I'm just going to show what we do, not saying it's right, just going to show you what we do. We're up in the northwest county, or northwest part of Clinton County, around Rossville, Windy Lane Farms. Next year we'll be a 150-year farm in the family. Real proud of that. I'm a 5th generation. Son Ty is 6th, and his family's 7th. Okay, here's the first slide. I was out chasing voles yesterday. What I did find in one field, there's 20 big circles, and there's only about 25% of them active. You can see where coyotes probably have dug up a lot, or dogs or hawks are getting a lot of them, but you got some ugly holes. Okay. This is the cover crop we had in the spring of 2012. It's annual ryegrass, celia, village radish, and crimson clover. And it was probably one of the best cover crops I ever had into the spring, but we'll go through the slides here and show you what can happen. Here's the way we seed our cover crops. We use a Henniker air seeder. They're cheap. Anybody can get into one easily. You don't need a $100,000 planter or air seeder. This is an air seeder. We used to have one for soybeans. I was familiar with it. We didn't like it for soybeans, but for cover crops it seems to work very adequately. I paid a sum of $15,000 for this 40-foot Henniker air seeder. How can you go wrong? Steel's pretty high at the scrap yard. If nobody wants it. And it is an air seeder. Mix anything with it. It's 15-inch rows. not as good maybe as some of the drills maybe, but I think it's adequate. And I can mix anything I want with it and it'll put it on. Here's a mix in that first slide. You can see the annual ryegrass, Phacelia is the broadleaf in the middle. We have a legume with crimson clover, and then the tillage radish is brassica. So we have all 4 types of cover crops in one mix. And that's ideal, but with the weather, things change. Will that happen this fall? Not on very many acres, probably. This is an elevator facility that we own, and this is our fertilizer warehouse. And I keep the cover crop seeds in there. I can virtually mix up any cover crop I want. I just have to know ahead of time to get it in. And you may carry some of it over to next year because you weren't able to get it on. But it's set up with scales. It's very easy to use, user-friendly for me. Did not cost much. We revamped it. And I was able, with that Henniker and this system of mixing, and just myself, I did 4,300 acres last fall all by myself. So it can be done if you want to do something bad now. And that was with no Sundays either. This is one of my first efforts when we had a Kinsey soybean planter. I did the precision planting thing where we went every 3 to 4 inches like Rodney was doing, and it turned out very, very well. But then later I also have found that tillage radishes do better if they have a neighbor. They like companions. Close up of a tillage radish. If anybody's seen one of these buggers before? I have root boxes in the shop where I grow cover crops all year round, and pots, and throw this together and throw that together. How does this mix with do in here? Does buckwheat grow in here? Does, you just try different combinations and try to find the one that is the most aggressive and not get subdued, because with that annual ryegrass, that 4-way mix I had up there, the annual ryegrass just subdued everything. Come the next spring, and I only put 12 pounds total mix on, but the annual ryegrass was, it kept the others at bay. It was the dominant one in there. And it's a good cover. We had ponding issues that year. It didn't matter to that. We had ponds 6 times by the next spring, and it doesn't matter. You can't kill it, I don't think, with ponds. The cereal rye does not like wet feet whatsoever. It gets water on it once, it's gone. And that part I don't like about it. The annual ryegrass, I want that stuff growing in the ponds and the low areas to break up, why that area doesn't drain. And annual ryegrass is very, very good at that. But anyway, I have root boxes, and then I have slides on the side that I can actually slide up. The root boxes are about this tall. And I plant different varieties of cover crops in there all the time, and then I can raise the sides up and see what the rooting structure looks like on all the different crops. And lo and behold, when I first started out, this is a fungus of some sort. I don't know what, it has a name or anything, but it was absolutely beautiful. You can see how large it actually is. It's like 4 inches in diameter. It's just beautiful, something growing in the soil. No-till versus conventional. We had a farm management tour at our farm on Wednesday, and my part of the program was talk about covers and conservation tillage, and I did what you saw here this morning. This is a slate test that I did, and that was on Wednesday afternoon, probably 4 o'clock, and I took this picture yesterday afternoon about the same time. And the no-till soil on the left, you can probably figure out by now, and the neighbor's conventional tilled soil on the right is all in the bottom of the jar. whereas mine up here is still holding you can see it a whole lot more. Can you see the strands, kind of strings hanging down? I dug this out of a cereal rye field that went to soybeans, and the soil is so full of the fine roots. Those are strands of roots hanging down with the soil hanging on, won't letting it drop out. Cereal rye just has roots and roots everywhere. In fact, if you go on the internet and research it like I have, there's a website on there that says some poor grad student somewhere was given the challenge of finding out how many roots was on a 4-month-old cereal rye plant. Well, he came up with these numbers on the internet, so it has to be true. But he determined there was, on one plant, 4 months old, there's 385 miles of roots. And then he took it a step further, and on those 385 miles of roots, he determined there was 6,600 miles of root hairs. So those are all big numbers. They don't have to be exact, but you get the point. There's a lot of roots from one plant. And that is kind of showing you what happens with that. This is what happens from those fields of annual ryegrass that you saw in the first slide there. This spring's our second crop of annual ryegrass. It's a free crop. We shouldn't be discouraged by that, but with new seed coming on all the time, not everything germinates the first year, and you may have to put up with this the next year. So don't be alarmed. Be happy it's there, I guess, and go on. I was very discouraged, I guess, that is in a field where I had planted previously oats, tillage radish, and crimson clover, and it did perfectly fine. It did everything you wanted to do. At the end of January, you could row the crimson clover from one end of the field to the other this year. Thought, boy, I got it made. And it looked good in February, but then something happened in March, and all the crimson clover was killed. I mean,
Single digit overnight after it broke dormancy.
yes.
Third week of March. Yeah.
It just took it all out. It was beautiful. It was off to the races, and you couldn't ask for a better stand. But that's all left is volunteer. That was what was planted in there. This is a cereal rye picture I took at May 5th. We plant our soybeans into fields that look like this. Our green planter that looked somewhat like this planter out here. We have a 1790 John Deere planter, and the axles that used to be green are no longer green. All the paints wore off, they're shiny. All the rye was this tall. Beans were perfect. Soil conditions were absolutely perfect. You got to be careful with that. The year before, if you let your cereal rye get that tall, you had a problem with no rainfall. Your soil would be just terribly dry. You couldn't plant it. You wouldn't get beans up at all. But this year it was actually an advantage because we were so wet. It was doing us a favor of getting the moisture out of the soil. And another picture of our cereal rye. And can you tell there's 15-inch rows there with the cereal rye? I mean, it just looks good. Here's the excellent stand of soybeans we had just coming up. You can see how the cereal rye has died down. We plant our beans in 20-inch rows. Kind of a stickler, our 15-inch row planter, we had too many tire tracks on 8, 12 rows out of 32. And on top of the bean rows, I just don't think that's a good place for a tire track, so we switched to 20s. We virtually have no tire tracks whatsoever on top of a row, and 20-inch machinery is pretty cheap to buy. Nobody wants to use 20-inch machinery. This is the picture I took yesterday of the same cereal rye field, you can't tell that, you know, the rye was this tall when we planted it at all. It's good looking beans. That's all I got. No. Basically, to sum this up, everybody's talking about a systems approach, and we really need to keep that in mind. Don't look for a silver bullet. There is no silver bullets. What you need to think about more is using silver buckshot. You got lots of silver bullets. Put it all together, and then you got a good program. And it's as simple as you want your fields to be as good as the fence rows that separate you and your neighbor. And if you take a soil analysis of a fence row, you'll know why. The organic matter's high, the biology's high, and when you plant over it, everybody knows the corn yields are always 30 bushel better or more. Well, there's no reason we can't make the rest of the field exactly like the fence row. And it's that simple. You just try to get the rest of all your fields to be in fence row shape, and good things will happen.
I should have mentioned earlier, you know, one thing that is common to all three of these farmers, you know, one, they do a great job of doing our job of selling great conservation. I mean, they're just tremendous spokespeople for conservation and everything that they do. Also, all three have hosted the Purdue Farm Management Tour, or at least part of it. I think that's right. So, you know, Purdue Ag Econ does a great job of picking some of the best managers. And I find time and time again, some of the best business manager farmers make some of the best conservation farmers. So that's a common thread that I see time and time again. So Mike Shooter's next up.
Well, thank you, Barry. I think another common thread is all three of us share a lot with each other. But we've all shared a lot of things together, and that's probably one thing that if we got one real point today, it's find somebody to help you, to mentor you if you're looking at getting into this now, and that's something that everyone that's, I think, doing conservation tillage, cover crops, has a willingness to do that. So that's one area we want to start. A little bit about our operation. Two sons in the operation right now. Where are we at here? A couple, 3 years ago, I discussing a lot of things with Rodney, and I asked him one night, he probably remembers this question. I said, hey Rodney, if you could seed cover crops, didn't have to worry about the crop being there, when would you like to seed it? He told me August the 15th. And he's right, and he knew we had this machine. And his next statement was, and I didn't even tell him anything, was that I like your idea and the way you're headed with it. So we were working on putting together a cover crop seeder. This is a Miller sprayer we've got. That first one was bare machine. We put a Gandy box in it, and then got a new boom and plumbed that up. We're actually in the process right now of revamping a little bit of this, going with some bigger hoses. But I figured there's about 1,600 feet of hose on this machine. This is a picture of a year ago seeding into standing corn crop. Pretty much what it looks like, and neighbors see something like that going through the field, and one neighbor had a fish fry one night and said, what in the world were you doing? So I had to explain that to him, but this is what it looks like when we're seeding with it, just getting ready to fill it up. We've got a gutter seed train that we used to fill it with. What it looks like from the cab. In the bean field, and then this is what you meet coming down the road. So I've had 2 sickles so far that I've met, and you can tell both of them kind of looked at, can I go underneath that thing? So far they haven't, but I'm waiting for one to do that. This is a year ago when Patrick started harvesting. They took a couple pictures of annual ryegrass, crimson clover, radishes, normal mix that a lot of us are using. This was seeded on August 23rd, and he pulled in there September 1st to harvest it, and that's the stand we had. Some of Rodney's comments about seeding like this needs to be at least 2 weeks earlier, and I agree with that. You can get by with it seeding it later if you're putting it in the ground, but our objective is to start seeding on the 15th of August, be done by the 15th of September. This year, anything we seeded in the last half of September just didn't get established well enough to do us any good. Another picture of that. We're in there in the fall then with the strip till unit. That's actually in some bean stubble before we had cover crops in this field. And that unit right there is for sale right now. We're working on developing a new set of equipment for that. So if anybody wants to get into strip till pretty cheap, we can work a deal out. This is what the field looks like after it's been seeded. This was bean stubble and then strip tilled. That's what it looked like this spring when we're in there to kill a standing speed or cover crop. This is what it looked like from the planter tractor. When we're strip tilling, we're going to take those 2 rows out that are under the tractor tires, under the strip till cart tires. They're not going to remain there. There's that much traffic over them, but everything else is there. That was sprayed 2 or 3 days before it was planted there, but that's where we're at. This was a year ago where we had time to kill it ahead of time and what it looked like. Pretty ideal conditions is what I think it is. These 2 pictures here are something very interesting this spring. We've got a neighbor on the south side of County Road. We farm for fields for about 3 miles on the north side, and there've been no-till, strip-till, no-till for 30 years. Been strip-tilling for 10 or 11 years now. This bean stubble field right here was field cultivated 3 times this spring. Drove down that road after 1 8/8 of rain. That's what the south side of the road looked like. That's the north side of the road, the exact same spot where we've been. I've had the cover crop killed on it, but that's basically 30 years of no-till and strip till work. So just amazing what's going on there, but I bet pretty good money that he's going to field cultivate at least 2 times next spring too. So I don't understand why we can't see what's going on out here, but we can. This is waist-high corn on the 10th of June. That's actually part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, is to make sure that grandson has a good set of fields to farm on when he gets there. Waist high on him is a little bit shorter than somebody else, but we had waist high corn. This is a picture of our bean planter, and we'll probably made a little bit of change in it this year, planting into cereal rye. Our system little bit about the system, I guess. We're 2 years of corn, a year of beans. And I'll get a little bit later, I'll go over the cover crop regime that we're working with this year. But bean planter here is basically set up like the corn planter is. Barry doesn't like my row cleaners on the front of it, but in cereal rye this year, they worked real well. We did go to a cast iron closing wheel on the back, paired up with the spike closer this year because the conditions have done a better job than the way this is set up here. But that's basically what our bean planter looks like. Those are inner diameter, reduced inner diameter tires on both planters, but it's just amazing how much we can actually reduce population and get just as good a stand for the planter over our last seeder before that. Hal was a Henniger seeder.
It does the perfect, Henniger does the perfect job though. You got all kinds of sizes of seed. It'll put any of them at any depth you want. It's all the way from 1/8 of an inch to 1.5 inches.
You just can't.
Something for everybody.
You just can't control it at that depth, though. And it'll have an inch and a half seeds everywhere.
Yep.
But just almost perfect stands with this thing, and it's done a good job for us. We've actually got ground we're only putting 125,000 seeds per acre on the good black dirt and making it work. This is another, you can call it a mistake if you want to, but it's an experiment we did. Had 35 acres that we just could not get into. Haven't had Rodney over there long enough to get some drainage done for us, but we're going to need to get some done. This cereal rye got to be mature at about this height. Finally got to the point, dried out enough, we felt like we could plant it. Went in with the planter just like you saw there. This is, if I can get this to work, a little bit of a video that my son Brian took of this planter running through here. If I can get it to stop now. Well, I couldn't get it to stop, but you could see the rows in there. Had done a nice job of with the row cleaners on and cleaning that row. That was planted on the 6th. I don't know how well you can see it. This was a picture I took on the 24th, broad daylight, but for some reason it was dark. But you can see the beans in there, and it's going to have a really good bean stand, I think, for something that not the way I would encourage you to plant beans in the cereal rye, but I guess I'm not afraid of planting beans in the cereal rye anymore, and I think anybody that's had a chance to do it like I was talking, it's something I think we're going to actually see more of, just because you've got better soil conditions there, and it's something I think we can really make work. This is another piece that nitrogen bar that we have for a Miller sprayer. Actually, we'll be in corn tomorrow if he doesn't get in there today. Starting to put some 28 on corn that's probably this tall now. Doesn't show it in that picture, but we've got optic sensors on there that we can actually let it control the nitrogen rate based off the color of the corn that's seeing right at that point in time. So, if it works, we've got a 24-row bar that's just done at the fab shop today that we're trying to get put together. I don't know whether we're going to get together for this spring, this summer or not. It'll have 12 shanks on it. It'll be every other row. If we can make that work, we're going to be doing a lot more of this second application of nitrogen at a little better timing time, and that's kind of where we're headed with that. A little bit about our cover crop program. First year corn, second year corn, and soybeans. First year corn, we're going to be putting the NutriBuilder blend, the annual ryegrass, crimson clover, radishes into that corn. So this is a chemistry that we're using, burned down chemistry, and the verdict is sharpen and outlook, which is our residual. But that's what we're doing to burn that down, so we'll be able to put NutriBuilder blend or the radishes and the clover in this fall. One of the guys talked about watching your chemistry, and that's probably the thing that we concentrated on the most to begin with, was making sure our chemistry was right. Second year corn, we're going to be putting cereal rye into that, going to beans. Gives us a chance to use product like Lumax with the Quisto in it. Quisto is one thing you got to keep out of the mix if you're going to put radishes or clover in it that fall, but that's where we're at with that. To come in with the sharpened Power Max, that combination. And if you're going to do it, it needs to be mixed in that order. Methylated acetyl needs to go in last. It has to be with the sharpened. Citric acid, we're actually testing our water. This mix was at about right at a 4 pH when we sprayed it. And that makes the Power Max work a whole lot better. And then when we go to beans, we're going to be putting NutriBuilder in it. This year we're actually changing this a little bit. We're going to be putting oats, radishes, and clover into beans. Part of that is to change the biology a little bit, just add a different species in there, a little more diversification, feeding different organisms. Have you ever had that slide around here with the 6 different organisms in it? I need that slide, but that's what we're looking at, is some of these cover crops will feed different organisms, and that's part of what we need to be looking at, is trying to feed the whole gamut of organisms, and that's the reason we're going to try the oats. And seeding in the soybeans, standing soybeans, there's not a real good formula for it. You have to kind of understand where you're at in the season. You get them on too early before you get a lot of leaf drop, and you're not going to get a good establishment of them. You get them on really too early, and you get them growing good. And Patrick has already told me he doesn't want to have to cut them in when he's cutting soybeans. So you got to kind of watch when you see that. You get them on too late. And again, you just don't get good establishment there. This is a little bit of your spray mixes and how you make them work. Things need to be actively growing, and there was a tremendous difference between this year and last year in when we were able to spray and how we were spraying. It could be warm conditions forecast. This is something that's kind of hard to do, but you have to go back to spread to learn to do it. Is between 4 and 5 o'clock is when we quit spraying, usually when we're trying to kill cover crops. And I don't know, Rodney can get Roy to stop that early or not, but it's just something you got to do. With sprayer capacities that we've got now, it's not a big issue. When you can cover everything that's there too, that's not a big issue. But give that plant a chance to absorb that chemical before it goes into shutting down for the night, and that helps a lot. The citric acid we talked about. Actually, 10 to 12 gallons of water. The less water you use, the stronger the mix is, and that helps to get things killed a little better too. Right nozzle setup, good penetration. I've seen some discussion on the AI nozzles. We use extended range AI nozzles, and and does a good job. The regular AI nozzles are not quite as good at that. And again, the pH down below 5, we've got down to 4, which I think I could almost burn this concrete with that. So that's kind of where we're at. I think these are your quotes, Barry. Soil quality is what we have, and soil health is what we do with it. And that's, I guess, the key to what and why we're doing what we're doing now. So we're trying to keep a living, vital system going all the time in there. And that's been a discussion you've heard all day. So I've got one other slide set here, if I can get it to come up. I asked my agronomist a couple days ago to send me some information on what our organic matter has done. We've been working with him for 7 years now, and this is a set of slides that he sent me of our best farms that's done the best. The wording he sent with me was that organic matter over our whole farming operation has increased 6.5%, and that average was from 2.8 to 2.98 organic matter since '06. And there's select fields, and that's what some of these are, that our organic matter has increased between 20 and 35% over that period of time. So, like I said, these are some of the best ones, but and most of these that are our best ones, that one there, that one there is one close to the shop that's got hog manure on it. First one had hog manure on it. That one had hog manure on it. So is that one's getting hog manure this year. We're actually strip applying our hog manure with a Dietrich shank, planting right back on top of it. Part of the key to that is we need to come back with that nitrogen bar with the sensors on it to make sure that we get nitrogen covered in places that, because of the variation in the nitrogen in the hog manure, you'll have some areas that you need to put some more on. That field's got hog manure on too. So, but I just wanted to document what we were doing, and I let him give me the numbers, and that's kind of where we're at, and that's 30 years of no-till, and that's started a lot of it. Rodney ran a field for me to look at doing some tiling on. That field there is normally a wet farm. You saw it, you know what it looks like. It's been known to be a wet farm. We had annual ryegrass, clover, and radishes we put on it last fall. And with all the rains we've had, there's a lot of holes in fields around that. But that field does not have a hole in it this spring. And that's been no-till for the 15 years or so that we farmed it, and the ryegrass on it this spring. I mean, you know what the farm looks like, Rodney, and it ought to be wet, but it's not. And I think it's a lot of it's because of that. So it's going to pay big dividends this year.
Thanks. Here, take this one back over there, and I'll let you guys share this back and forth. I'll switch to this one. There's a few cards came in. Thanks, Mike. Got some more.
Need more cards? I'll take.
Okay, I'll start with the ones I've already read. Some of these we may have already answered as they went through the slides, but we'll go through them pretty quickly here. One says, can you plant cover crops or ryegrass in bean stubble can you get a good stand if you just run like a double basket crumbler? What's your opinion? Can you get a stand in bean stubble with something like that?
I can get a standing bean stove with just blowing it on top, so you ought to be able to get a better stand by doing a little bit of something with it. So it should improve it.
Yeah, like I said, just try and match your seeding, your method of seeding a little bit to the seed type. Something like annual ryegrass, you'd plant ryegrass in a yard on top of the ground or just scratching it in. And so if it just gets a little bit of moisture, it's good. Don't take your bigger, harder seeds and try and throw them on top and expect them to do as well unless you get rain. But yeah.
And they're like gas will grow in the driveway.
Okay, while we're on the cover crops, and I think, Rodney, you had a chart, I think it was Rodney, when should you make the decision to plant cover crops, either go from air or switch to conventional or vice versa? But as far as drilling it, I'm guessing is what this means. Warren, is that? What's your trigger as far as if you get it flown on versus?
For us personally, we looked a lot at our cash crop planting date and maturity. We don't fly stuff on the fields that are going to get harvested early, where we're going to get a chance to go in and do what I feel is a little more consistent job, actually planting with the planter or drill or something like that. So we'll stick to those fuller season soybeans or corn that's going to come off a little later, and we know we're going to be outside of our window to get into the field, and those are what we see as the opportunities for the aerial or that type of application for us, since we're doing both.
Okay, we'll stay with the cover crop questions for just a second. How many have you started taking credits for any of your cover crops, the growth or the fixation of nitrogen or the scavenging? Has anybody made an attempt to try to take credits yet?
We're doing some tests with some different cover crops with Purdue, I guess, through the hub farm and things, and hope to have some data. At this point, we think there's a credit there, but we're, I guess, using it to build the soil and build carbon and build organic matter rather than counting on it for the crop. So we know it's there because we see the organic matter coming up, and so that gives us more nitrogen, gives us more nutrients, but we're not trying to take them out for the crop.
I think we're in the same position. One thing that we've got is that optic sensors on that nitrogen bar, and that'll be able to adjust nitrogen rates for us without taking a credit. I mean, it's taking a credit, but it's a little more of being able to sense what that crop needs, and I mean, I'm sure there's credits there. We just haven't tried to figure that into our rotation yet. But we do have a field that's the one I said was behind the shop. We've got set up with some Rex passes, some couple 3 passes with no nitrogen on it yet. We'll be putting it on tomorrow, and passes with 100 pounds and passes with 200 pounds, and we're going to be messing with some different rates on top of those to kind of see what we can get by with and what we can do, and how much we can push it to.
Am I allowed to chime in? I have somewhat of a standard answer when people ask me that all the time. Okay, how much is cover crop? How much can I cut back on my fertilizer? I think the very first and foremost job of the cover crop is to keep what we are applying there. To keep more of the fertilizer that we're applying and we've got in the soil, keep it in play. And if we can do that, we're going to optimize the uptake of more nutrients and increase production capacity. Over time, you do this a lot of time, maybe have some testing, some field trials like these guys are doing, but you might be able to find where you can reduce. But the very first job is increase the production capacity of your soil and keep these nutrients that we have got on the land. If we could do that, that's like a major bunch of free nutrients that are otherwise getting away from us.
Those two slides that I had from one side of the road to the other, I'm not sure what was in that water that left that field, but there was something there.
Pretty sure that water didn't do anybody any good. I'm sure if we could get water to go in the soil, it might help us a little.
Well, I thought Darrell touched on that very well a little while ago. During his presentation, I hadn't thought about this, but he thinks we actually need to maintain our nitrogen rates with everything we're doing to get a better cover crop to build up the carbon in the soil, rather than trying to reduce rates.
Yeah, it depends on your mix, it depends on your rotation, but certainly if we're trying to build carbon, you can't do it without protein, you can't have protein without nitrogen. So
I think another thing that we'll see following a corn crop, you'll have some nitrogen left there that your cover crops will actually do better on than what they will behind the bean crop a lot of times. We had the blend that we use in a cornfield and a bean field side by side this time, and the cornfield side of it was a whole lot better growth. Wasn't seeded that much different either. But this fall it seemed like for us anything after the 15th of September, and that's not always going to be the case. I think this year a little bit different weather-wise, but after the 15th of September it was hard to get anything established very well.
okay, you guys have addressed it, but here's another question: that if you think you've got compaction, what's the latest you can plant a cover crop to help with compaction, and then what would it be?
For us, it depends on what your major crop's going to be for the next year. And we're always trying to get cereal rye ahead of soybeans and annual ryegrass ahead of corn. I mean, the latest question is something. I mean, I could go to the other side of it. How early can you get it planted to get the job done? I mean, the earlier you can get it in the ground, the better off you'll be. But some of those dates that Rodney had up there kind of go along with where it's not going to be that useful to get it planted after that.
Okay. Switch gears here. Well, let's get one final cover crop, and I'm not sure you guys, but there might be somebody in the crowd. Has anybody incorporated annual cover crops into a perennial pasture to give it a boost? Anybody used anything like that? I don't know. Anybody out here, any with some pasture? Perennial pasture? I have seen, I don't know, Josh, have you put any annual cover crops into some of those perennial rangeland to help give it a boost? So any of these cover crop mixes?
There's there's a few introduced pastures or hayland, that's primarily over the years has kind of run out of gas, where it's become monoculture of just one specific grass species, and we have burned that down with Roundup or some other herbicide, and then planted the cover crop mix. And what we found is that the cover crop may or may not do real well in that stand to start with, but the stand itself comes back like gangbusters the following year, just for that injection of diversity. The example we had was a pasture / hayland field that was all smooth brome grass, which is pretty common in our area. That's what's in all the road ditches. And when the cover crop, it was in 06, it was a real dry year. The cover crop maybe grew about 6-8 inches at most, and that was just in some areas. The next year, alfalfas, clovers, vetches, plus the brome grass came back, and we had a day crop that was very significant. So we've done that, and then the only other thing that we have done, and we're just in the beginning stages of this, we're trying to establish strictly a cool season or strictly a warm season perennial foundation grass species that we're going to, when that goes dormant, we can go in there, or actually right before it goes dormant, we'll go in with the annual crop and let that perennial provide kind of the foundation of the soil health for that system, and then try and also take the annual crop off of it in its off season. But the timing is real important there, and I don't know if they're on the growing season to accomplish that, but they're doing some of that work in New Zealand and Australia.
Yeah, I've read, they're actually using this quite a few places. And actually, some of our dairy farmers in northern Indiana are trying some of this, where they just interplant some annual cover crops like the radishes and turnips and things right in, and seem to be getting a very good boost to their pasture the very next year. So I think diversity helps even in pastures. I'm going to switch back gears a little bit here now. Some of you have used gypsum, so there's a question here. Are there different kinds of gypsum? What are the rates that you use? What's a maximum or minimum a year? And how do you determine if you even need it?
All right, we'll start on that one. Yeah, we use gypsum on everything at this point as a calcium source and, as a sulfur source, and then as a calcium supplement to help build soil structure, help with the drainage. Works great for us. I'm going to say a ton to the acre every other year. That's not really a fixed rate. We do everything kind of by prescription and based on mag levels and soil type and things like that. But baseline would be half a ton a year applied every other year. So a ton every other year would be kind of our baseline. And we've seen good results to it, whether that's from the sulfur, whether it's from the the soil structure or the extra calcium being available where we've already got our pH right. A lot of things it could be, but for the dollars, we're seeing pretty good benefits.
We use the same rates. We try to do everything a ton every other year, and we've still got a little in the warehouse. We'll finally get rid of this one, I believe.
We're running with the 3-year rotation we're in. We're trying to do our lime and gypsum work ahead of the corn crop, ahead of a bean crop in our second year of corn. So, but we're using a 1-ton rate. But our agronomist is putting together maps where we may apply it, we may not, based off the mag levels. So that's the direction we're headed.
And most of you are triggering off of your mag level or your balance of calcium mag.
Yeah, there's a couple things. You want to watch that mag level on the high and low. Where you've got high mags, obviously you generally have some infiltration issues and things. The gypsum is great for pulling some of that, tying some of that mag up, replacing it with calcium, so you've got a little better soil structure. On the low side, if your mag levels are getting down below 10% on these soils around here, then certainly you're going to want to watch putting a lot more on. And also, from what I've been told, if you don't have your pH and your calcium right, you need to do that first. You need to get that calcium up at least over 60%. So you've got to, so the gypsum will do what it needs to do in the chemistry there. So you need to have your pH and your calcium correct to make sure your mag's not too low. And then from there, it's a good fit.
Did that answer the question? On the same card, we'll switch gears because this one's kind of on its own. Volunteer trees in a long-term no-till. Anybody got a problem with that?
They got kids and hose and clippers.
If you're going to no-till, you're going to have trees, you're going to have voles. Some of you may have slugs, but you just keep going.
Patrick come home after spraying some cereal rye with a plant, and we're starting to see mulberries out in the middle of the field, so we're going to have to start handling that a different way. But like Hal said, if you don't want to see those, don't start no-till.
Yeah, just keep in mind, this entire area was a forest at one time, so it kind of wants to be a forest. So you're getting closer back to a natural condition when the trees start wanting to come in. But one other thing I've found helpful is once you start having in your neighborhood a lot of this Roundup resistant or glyphosate resistant mare's tail, the things that you do to control glyphosate-resistant mare's tail kind of starts working on your trees as well. So I'll throw that out there.
Cereal rye will take care of them.
Cereal rye helps a little bit, doesn't it? I mean, it's, or
On the mare's tail.
oh, on the mare's tail, yeah, I believe it does, yes. Question on anhydrous ammonia. We're switching gears a little bit. Do you feel that the anhydrous ammonia affects the microorganisms, or does it help or hinder any of the development of those? And is it a little too hot? And then, or do you think the microorganisms are deep enough that they're not very effective? I guess overall, what do you do if several of you use an anhydrous ammonia, some of you aren't, but do you feel that you're able to manage any detriment to your microorganisms with the anhydrous ammonia?
There's been a lot of research done on that. You can read papers. We personally use 28% only and shy away from the anhydrous. Our feeling on that is not so much, it's been proven that there is a 6-inch band that is pretty well sterilized by that when you apply that, but it is also proven that a month later it's back to normal, if not more. So, being said that, I attack it as looking at it differently. You know, I know that anhydrous ammonia will tend to dissolve the carbon in the soil and let it go down instead of keeping it floated up, and that's why we tend to stay with 28. It's more of a carbon issue for us versus a microbial issue, because the little boogers are tough and they can come back, and with your cover crops, it helps the ammonia situation all along.
Yeah, we do use anhydrous, and I think Hal covered it pretty well there. We've looked and looked and looked, and a good healthy soil where you're doing these other things comes back so fast. I mean, we're using a single disc, John Deere single disc bar, putting it in a real tight band, you know, not super deep. Man, it's not very long, and you can't tell the difference between where it was and where it wasn't. So I don't think we're causing any long-term damage. We are probably burning off a little bit of carbon, but with the other things that we're doing, we feel like we're offsetting that. So for us, it comes down to a cost on the acres we're covering, and the cost of the product and the speed of getting across the acres. It works for us, but I think that's everybody needs to figure that balance out for themselves and their operation. And I don't think I would use the biology as an excuse one way or the other.
Yeah, we're using anhydrous, and then like we talked about coming back with 28 later on, but I think it's also on the earthworms, it's survival of the fittest. If they can't get out of the way, they're not quick enough to do the work they need to do, so let's do away with them. But they're usually deeper than that, but I mean, when it's hot, and when you see...
You're doing it at side dress time, right?
Yeah, we're side dressing everything. Earthworms are an interesting species. You go out there on an early spring day when it's rained, and you see them laying all over the place, but when it starts warming up, they're going down deep enough that they're not going to be getting affected by that very much. I mean, 30 years of no-till, and we've always side dressed everything. We've still got the activity there, so I don't think we're hurting it any.
I missed this one on cover crops earlier, but I think we sort of addressed it. I think they're talking about, maybe Mike's, when you talk about blowing it, your cover crop seed on top, is that similar? Would a similar effect be what you could get out of like the old Ingate type seeder, or just a broadcast seeder?
Well, it's the one picture in there. We've got a diffuser on the bottom of that hose, so it's going to scatter it a little bit underneath the canopy. And part of the reason we've gone that way, or we're trying to do it aerial, is we're getting it down in the canopy better. We're not seeding cover crops into the leaf whorls of that corn plant, which I don't think is a big issue, but when we got it down there below the canopy, we can kind of get it to disperse and spread out a little better. We've just seen good results out of it. You get into a dry time and you're not going to get rain for a week or two. You're not going to get established till you get rain on it. So, and getting it established, we like to get them established early. As long as your corn plant's there going good, it's going to establish and just sit there till the canopy gets opened up, and then it'll take off and grow. So that's pretty much what we've seen with it. And I don't have to go spray my neighbor's field to kill the cover crops that Rodney seeded on them. So.
All right, this one's going to be in depth. I'm going to probably have to paraphrase it a little bit because it's a full card. I do have to commend whoever this person is. This is some of the most beautiful handwriting I've ever seen in a long time. So, but the summary of this, if I read it right, is, you know, whether you're a fan or not of the organic agriculture movement, there are a lot of concepts that the organic folks talk about as far as soil health and ecological discussions that kind of make some sense. When you rely heavier and heavier on chemicals, as many people feel we're relying solely on chemicals when we move to a no-till system and things like that. What do you think the long-term ramifications of that are? And if I didn't get that, then whoever wrote this, help jump in with some additional.
I actually think we're using less chemistry than we used to when we were conventional anyway. And primarily we're using glyphosate with the residual. That residual is not any different than anybody else is using out here. So I understand the organic side of things. I just know we cannot produce enough food for this world, and I guess one of what I think I'm put on this earth for is to grow food for the world, not just this county or this state, but for the world. And we cannot produce enough food for this world under an organic system, but there are pieces of that organic system that we need to be looking at and using, and that's, I think, the continuum that was up here on one of Josh's slides kind of fits into that. We're in between the two of them, between organic and total conventional. I mean, there's some of those ideas have validity in soil health, but I don't think we can get the total organic system and be able to feed this world anymore.
On our farm, we personally decided we don't go Roundup crops anymore. We do non-GMO corn and have switched to Liberty for soybeans as seed source for Bex. But we've tried to use far less Roundup than we have in the past. And do I see anything different? I don't know, but that's just what we've chosen to do.
Yeah, I think these guys covered it. I mean, I have learned a lot and read a lot and have a lot of respect for some of the ideas that organic agriculture has come up with in the last 20 years. I think it's a foundation for a lot of things we're doing now in understanding the biological side of it. Production-wise, for us, we don't see it as a fit yet. That doesn't mean that, if some things, if we get some more things figured out, maybe it would be down the road. But for us, we're looking for a sustainable system that we feel like we can, continue to build the soil and build productivity. And if we can do that, and we've got good biology and a good balanced soil, it's kind of like the anhydrous question. I really think a functioning soil with all that going on is going to process that chemistry. It's going to, cycle those nutrients and the pesticides and everything else, and be fairly resilient. So I guess that's where we're at on it. If anything, the thing we worry about more is probably the fungicides and things. We're much more hesitant on the fungicides and insecticides because of the effect that they have on the biology that we're trying to promote. So that's probably the one thing that we just try to temper our use of.
And that's actually in here too, that as chemistry goes, fungicides tend to be a little nastier maybe, and there is across agriculture a little higher use now of fungicides, and like Rodney said, so I guess what's your thought on that? How are you going to, what's your long-term plan with fungicides too? So Rodney can hit it with.
Well, to finish up on the last question, it was on our slides and I didn't point it out. We are running Liberty on all of our beans too, and that's partly to break that chemistry up. There's 3 different chemistry programs in our system, and a lot of that's just to get different chemistries into the system. Fungicides, we're using them most of the time, but we're scouting to make sure that we're needing them. There's some fields we'll do, some fields we won't, but we try to scout and see where we're at on our fungicides. But that's in our system if it's something that's necessary.
Yeah, so to a man, we're managing for resistant weeds and things by alternating modes of action, and I think that's good strategy for all of us. We need to all probably be doing more than that, and do as much scouting as we possibly can, and use as many of these chemicals as judiciously as possible is probably an underlying message that I'm hearing from that. Hoping I got that question close to right, and if we've got any more, I'd say find these guys at the end, and if you've got any more specific things, whoever had that question.
How many more questions do you have, Larry?
I have one more.
One more, this is it, guys.
This is it.
Thanks for hanging in with us.
Who or what motivated you to focus on soil health as one of your guiding principles? It's a good one. Well, maybe there's a second one here on the same card. And I'll just throw both of them out there since they're on the same card. Do you believe other producers will take a similar holistic approach? And what's the main hurdle that you think you've experienced and that they will experience? I changed that a little bit. So.
Barry, I think your name's on that card. You just want to pat on the back.
I swear I didn't write that.
Well, I'm lucky enough I've got 2 guys here that I think have influenced what we've done a lot. Been doing a little bit longer than we have, and certainly have been great sources of information for us. My family started this process before I got out of college and came back to the farm. So I've been blessed that way by associating with some great people that have encouraged us to try things and move along. And I think in the short term, there's going to be a lot of reasons why people are interested in soil quality, both from sustainability and what they want to do with their farm long term, and short term yields and economics and things like that, and maybe some $2 or $3 corn to make it even more interesting at this point. So, but anyway, I think there's going to be a lot of reasons. There'll be some pitfalls, but it's encouraging when you come and talk to a lot of people like we're here today, and I think we're going to see a lot more.
I've always been interested in soil biology dating back to the 80s, actually, and the first time you can really validate it was with a yield monitor. When you remove that fence and you plant corn with the old fence row, and you can actually see that, you know, the monitor is 30, 35 bushel better, just those rows that you take out with the fence row away, then there's an aha moment. You just think like, oh, what's different about that versus the rest of the field? And I took it a step further and I did a soil test of the fence row and then took soil tests out in the field, and I'd get a number for the biology, and it wasn't even close compared to what is in a fence row, the virgin soil. So that just gets you thinking, and you think, well, it's that simple. I just got to change the field to get like the fence row, and it was made by grasses mainly. Well, then why aren't we planting grasses as a cover crop? And known about cover crops for many, many years, but I just didn't get the push soon enough. I wished I'd done it 30 years ago instead of, you know, the past few years.
Mine probably started back in the early 70s when I got out of Purdue. The agronomy department up there told us that we could not affect organic matter. I said, what? And at that point, everyone in the world pretty much was a moldboard platform. We started doing a lot of chisel plowing and trying to incorporate the organic matter back into the soils. And it's just something you just keep studying. Meetings like this, a lot of different interactions with a lot of good friends like these are. Probably the thing that started us on no-till in 1983 was, if any of you around here that remember the early 80s, you had to do something different to survive. And that's really kind of what started us in no-till. And when you make the decision, you sell a couple field cultivators, and you're pretty much committed to making it work, and that's kind of where we've developed from. And it's just, I don't know where we'll be 10 years down the road, but we're always looking ahead. Somebody says something to me about change every year, and I said, well, I can't remember back to what happened last year, so change is nothing new. But it's friends like these that you interact with that give you the ideas and thought processes. And I guess to finish up, I'm going to head to CCSI just a minute, and Rodney and I are both on Hub Farms for that. I think you've got a field day set up for the 28th of August. We'll have a field day on September 4th, and I'm sure that the conservation groups around here will be publicizing that. But we'll be opening up our farms to come see what we're doing, see some of the equipment, go into a lot more detail than what we've been able to here today of doing that. But we invite, I'm sure Rodney says the same thing, we'll invite all of you to come join us on those days.
Yeah, be sure to check the CCSI website. If you just Google search CCSI, you'll probably get it. And we'll have those events posted, time, place, location, as those. Most of them are already on there, but at least the time and location.